Now, what if I have a variable and I want it to be shared by all the functions that I have in my file? In that case, what we would do is we would create a variable that's called a global variable, and we would create it outside of any function so that all the functions can access it. So if I come here and I have area, or I have x here inside the function, only main can access this x. But what if I want to have like a variable, like for example, max student count? So I want to say the maximum student count that I can have in the class is 24. And I want all the functions to be able to access it. So what I do is I put it outside. As long as it's outside, we call that a global variable. It doesn't belong to any function. If it's in a function, it belongs to that function. If it's not in a function, that means it's a global variable and any function can use it. So if I come here and I say print max student count, let's just say in and I'm going to copy this code and I'm going to put it here also, but this one is in calc square. And here we should actually return the area and perimeter. Now in main, you know, if I put it in here also, when I run this code, I will see the method. Oops, let's look at line 14 and fix it. Oh, return. What else is wrong? Line 22. Line 22. Okay, so here's. Okay, one more try. Okay, so now I see that 24, which is the max student count, got printed in main because I tried printing it in main. It's 24. And then when I called calc square did some stuff and it printed it here too. So it got printed. So the fact that I created this variable, because I created this variable, max student count, outside, all the methods, all the functions were able to see it. Now I didn't call calc rectangle. I could also do that so that we can see that it's done. It's going to have the same value. See that it's going to get printed 3 times. And so now I see that in calc rect, it's also 24. Now, that's the first thing we want to do, is we want to be able to create those variables that are global variables so that anyone can access them. What kind of variables should we make global? Variables that matter to everyone. So if every class at MCC, for example, had a max student count of 24, I would make that a global variable. Maybe the tuition per credit, you know, tuition per credit. How much money do I need to pay for each one credit class, for example? That's something that's global that everyone, all the functions at MCC might need to use. So anything that might be shared by any of those functions, that is something that you would make a global variable. You wouldn't make area and perimeter global variables because those are unique to each of the functions that are down there. Now, what if I have a global variable and I want to change it? So let's say calc rect doesn't want the max student count to be 24. It wants the maximum student count to be whatever the area is. Okay. We want max student count to be equal to the area. So we want to change it. Let's see what's going to happen when I try changing it in calc rect. So I'm going to do in main is I'm going to call calc rect first. Okay. So here we're going to try to call calc rect, and calc rect is going to try to change the maximum student count. We're going to print it to see what it is, and then we're going to be printing max student count afterwards. So we want to know, is it going to be 24 or is it going to be the 7, because the area of this rectangle is 7. So let's try that. And we see that when we called calc rect came here, it calculated the area as 1 times 7, and then it said max student count equal to 7. So it changed max student count to 7 here, and then we printed 7, so that's why we see this 7 getting printed. And then main said print me max student count, but it's still 24. And when calc square got called, it also printed max student count as 24. So how come we see that it got changed here, but it didn't get changed at the top? So here, max student count got changed, but not the global variable. Why is that? So let me show you what is happening actually. So what's actually happening is that we have here the max student count. That's 24, that's global. Everyone can see that, okay? Now the first function that got called, main got called, and then calc rectangle got called. And actually when this line of code came to be executed, what calcorrect actually did, what's happening underneath the hood is that this line is creating a local variable. It is not changing the global variable. So it's coming and saying, oh, you want me to create a local variable to my function called max student count. So it comes here and says, okay, here you go, max student count. And you want it to be 7? Okay. You want me to print it? Okay. So this line of code is actually creating, this line creates a new local variable called max student count. Okay, so now I have two variables, one inside the area of calcorrect called max student count, and then I have one also that's global. And when we try to use or print in calcorrect, it says this is the one that's closest to me. So it sees this variable. It does not see the one in global. It doesn't see that one. Okay, so you can use global variables, but if you try to set a value to them, you're actually creating your own copy, your own variable. You're creating a local variable. You are not touching the global one. So what if I did want to touch the one that's global? I actually want to change the 24. I want to make it 100. So let's write here a function called def change max. Okay, so I actually want to create a function that changes it. So here, if I say max student count equal to 100, and let's just print it here. Print I change we put max student count, and let's call it here also. Let's call it change max. Let's see, is it going to do anything different? Well, inside of change max, it says I changed it to 100. It shows me that it's 100. But when we go to calcorrect, calcorrect says it's 7. And back in main and calc square, it's still 24. So nothing got changed. It's still, the global is still 24. All this did was just create a new function, change max, and now it has its own max student count as 100. That's all it did, the same as calcorrect. Nothing new, right? Now what I want to show you is that there is a way for you to actually change the global variable. If you want to change the global variable, you have to manually tell it that you're going to change it. So what you do is you put global max student count. And this tells the function, anytime you see me talking about max student count, I want you to use the global one. So when you see me changing, I want you to go change the one that's global. When you see me printing, I want you to go print the ones that's global. I do not want you to create a local one. So this forces the interpreter to use the global variable. This means no local variable with that name will be created. We won't create one. Okay, that's not going to happen. So let's test it and see what's going to happen now when I said make this one global. So now when I run the same code, I see here when I called, let me just make it a little bigger. So when we called change me, it says I changed the max to 100. Okay. And then when we called calcorrect here created its own local variable and set it to 7. So calcorrect is still seeing the 7. It's not using the global one. It is using its own. And then in main, later when I said print me max student count, it sees that it's 100. Why does it see that it's 100? It sees that it's 100 because change max changed the global one, because it said anytime you see me talking about the max student count, I'm talking about the global one. So I want you to change the global one. So now we know that the global one indeed did get changed. Who changed it? Change max. Because the value that change max put in it is the one that we are seeing now. And so if you want to change a variable that is global, what you do is you put the word global and the name of the variable in your function to indicate that anytime you see me talking about this variable, I am talking about the global one. I am not talking about a local one. I don't want you to go and create a local one for me. And so this is what the slides show you here, that if you want to use a global variable, the way you do it is you put the word global next to the variable name. So here in this code, what we're doing here in the show tax rate, this is creating a new local variable. But if I put the word global tax rate, now it's not creating a new one. It is referring to the global one. Okay. So is it a good idea to use global variables? So think about it. Sometimes it's a good idea, sometimes it's a bad idea. So there is a positive side to it. The nice thing about global variables is that I can use it for variables that are constant among many functions. For example, if all my classes have the same maximum student count, if all my credits at MCC, every one credit costs the same amount of money, I don't want to have to recreate that variable multiple times in every single function. Because if I have to now make the tuition more, which likely will happen at some point, you don't want to go and update every single function. You want to just update it in one place. So global variables are nice when you have constants that are shared among functions. And if you update that value, you only want to update it in one place. But the negative side, of course, is that sometimes it makes the code harder to read and figure out what's going on, because now you have several functions that have access to this variable. And if one of those functions says global next to the variable name, they can change this. And if it changes without you knowing, it might be hard to figure out which function changed it, because you have several functions that are in your file.